Welcome to TLC Uncovered. On this channel, we uncover what's really going on behind the biggest reality TV moments. And today, we're taking a closer look at Jennie's shocking second wedding. But something isn't quite right about this story, and 90-day fiancé enthusiasts are sensing it. 1 minute, Jennie's 10-year romance was seemingly unbeatable. The next, Instagram is abuzz with pictures, rumors, and speculation about a second wedding that no one saw coming. And the biggest question that fans can't seem to stop asking is quite simple, yet profoundly loaded. What actually happened to Jennie's 10-year love? So stick with me, because the reality of this moment is much more complex than a soundbite, and by the end of this video, you may very well be seeing Jennie's story in a whole new way. For years, Jennie's relationship was more than just another 90-day fiancé couple. It was a beacon of hope, of perseverance, of love, no matter what it means to pursue it. Viewers have watched her wait, fight, compromise, and hold on through circumstances that would have torn many couples apart long before the cameras even rolled. This is what makes this moment so shocking. As per the discussions that have been going around among the regular fans, the presence of Jennie's second wedding did not seem like the next step in the story. It seemed sudden, unexpected, almost unrelated to the love story that fans had been following for close to a decade. And when something doesn't seem right to fans who have been following a story for close to a decade, it is usually a sign that there is more to the story than meets the eye. This is not a matter of placing blame. It is a matter of perspective. Because 10-year relationships do not just vanish into thin air overnight. They develop. They break apart. They morph into something else long before the end is in sight. What's particularly fascinating is how rapidly the response has moved from shock to curiosity. The audience isn't just wondering what happened. They're wondering when things started to go awry. They're going back and watching old episodes, rethinking old conversations, searching for moments that seemed insignificant in the moment, but now seem to be full of significance. And that's where this story really is. Because the indicators, if fans are to be believed, didn't begin at the wedding. They began much earlier, in the little things, the unresolved conflicts, the emotional concessions that never quite got worked out. The sorts of things reality TV may not always focus on, but never quite conceals either. In this video, we're going to break down what happened to get to this point, why the fans are so conflicted, and how a 10-year love story could have possibly changed into something that no one saw coming. You'll want to stick around until the end because some of the most telling information isn't always the loudest, it's the quiet moments that people have missed. Before we go any further, ask yourself this question: if a relationship can make it through 10 years of challenges, what does it take for it to actually change? To grasp the extent to which Jennie's second wedding has shocked many of her fans, it is necessary to look back to the beginning, not only of the relationship but also of the emotional investment that the fans have made in it. Jennie's love story has not been presented as an easy or convenient one. It has been presented as a story of endurance. Right from the beginning, the fans have been watching Jennie make the choice of love in circumstances where it would have been easier to walk away, where it would have been safer and less painful. Jennie's relationship has been one of the most popular storylines in 90-Day Fiancé over the years. It has not been popular because it was perfect, but because it was persistent. Jennie has been wading through delays, misunderstandings, cultural differences, and times of great uncertainty. Each one of these hurdles has been a part of the story, and they have all served to reinforce the idea that if they could make it through this, they could make it through anything. This was not only true of Jennie but also of the fans. Audiences weren't just watching a couple. They were watching a test of patience, of loyalty, of how much someone is willing to give up in the name of love. Jennie moved her life, changed her expectations, and took the criticism from every angle: family, culture, even fans, all while still holding on to the relationship. Over time, that dedication made her story into something symbolic. She became the woman who never gave up. Which is why this moment is so shocking. Because when a relationship is founded on the premise of, "we've already survived everything," there is an assumption of permanence. Fans knew that the toughest moments were already behind her, that the sacrifices had meaning. And then something new comes along, like a second wedding, and it's not just the beginning of a new chapter. It's a contradiction. What many viewers are only now realizing is that longevity does not always equal stability. Sometimes it simply equals endurance. And endurance, when left unexamined for too long, can quietly morph into exhaustion. In retrospect, some viewers are beginning to pick out moments that seemed small in the moment but are now significant. Unfinished conversations. Compromises that were made but never revisited. Emotional needs that were acknowledged but not fully met. These were not cliffhangers, they were quiet moments. And quiet moments are easy to miss when the survival of a relationship becomes the narrative. Jenny's position in the relationship also influenced how viewers made sense of everything. She was often the one who waited, the one who adjusted, the one who held space for the unknown. This, when repeated over time, can create an imbalance, not always overt, but certainly present. And imbalance rarely ends with a cliffhanger breakup. It ends with a quiet drifting apart. What's uncomfortable about this revelation is that it goes against the story that fans thought they knew. The notion that love and time are all it takes to fix things. That commitment is the key to happiness. Jenny's experience is that sometimes, commitment is its own kind of sacrifice. And it's at this point that the second wedding becomes less of a surprise, and more of a question. Not just about whom she married, but about what she required after a decade of waiting, adapting, and holding out. In the next section, we're going to discuss the subtle points of no return that fans think signaled the end of the relationship. The points at which the relationship didn't blow up, but rather started to turn. When fans discuss being shocked by the second wedding of Jenny, what they are actually responding to is the sense that the conclusion did not live up to the narrative they believed they were watching. However, as has been suggested by many fans who have been watching the show for a long time, the turning point did not occur suddenly. Instead, it occurred quietly, through moments that were easy to overlook at the time but are now impossible to overlook. One of the most significant changes that fans have noticed is the emotional tone. Over time, the relationship between Jenny and her partner has ceased to feel like a relationship that is based on mutual momentum and has instead come to feel like something that Jenny is carrying on her own. There were fewer moments of shared joy, of conversations about a future that was mutually imagined. Instead, there were moments of what still needed to be worked on, what still needed to be waited for, what still needed to be negotiated. Such a pattern of behavior does not always look like a problem on the surface, but it can slowly change the way that a relationship feels. Another aspect that fans are re-examining is the way in which conflict was dealt with. In the earlier seasons, there were arguments that, although tough, still led to a point of reassurance or understanding. However, in the later seasons, these points often led to an emotional pause. Conversations would be left hanging. Problems would be recognized but not solved. And when a solution is always being put off, a distance can develop even if the two people are still physically close. Fans also picked up on the fact that Jenny was often the one who had to understand as opposed to being understood. There were certainly cultural issues, family dynamics, and practicalities that were all true, but the more that time passed, the more it seemed that the emotional heavy lifting was being done by Jenny. At first, fans were impressed by her understanding. Later, some fans began to wonder what the cost of that understanding was. What makes these moments so telling is the fact that they didn't seem so out of the ordinary when they originally aired. There wasn't a dramatic split episode. There wasn't a definitive moment where something was wrong. Instead, there was a sense of slowly losing ground. The kind of ground that can't be seen until after the fact. Viewers are now picking apart moments where Jenny seemed less optimistic, more resigned. Where the passion that drove her choices seemed to be replaced by duty. Not because she didn't care, but because caring had become tiring. And tiring doesn't make itself known with fanfare. It makes itself known with acceptance. This is why the second wedding feels so shocking and yet, so very right. When a long-term relationship goes from expansion to maintenance, and then from maintenance to survival, the emotional topography changes. What once felt like commitment can start to feel like waiting with no end in sight. The key thing to remember here is that none of this implies there is a villain or a betrayal. A relationship that goes on this long doesn't end because of one big thing. It ends because of a lot of little things that were never really fixed. And that's what the fans are realizing now. The wedding didn't end a 10-year relationship. It exposed that the relationship had already shifted long before the wedding ever happened. In the next section, we'll examine why the second wedding itself became such a big deal for the fans, and why it caused so much reaction and discussion on the internet. You won't want to miss this section, because this is where the reaction of the fans becomes just as interesting as the relationship itself. When images and conversations about Jenny's second wedding began circulating, the reaction wasn't just surprise, it was emotional whiplash. For many fans, it felt like turning a page too quickly, as if an entire chapter had been skipped. The shock wasn't rooted in judgment. It was rooted in confusion. How does a relationship that survived 10 years of obstacles transition so abruptly into something new? What made the wedding such a powerful symbol wasn't luxury or celebration, it was contrast. Fans had grown used to seeing Jenny fight for love, negotiate for acceptance, and wait for stability. The second wedding, by comparison, appeared decisive, certain, forward-moving. And that contrast forced viewers to confront something uncomfortable, the idea that certainty may have been missing from her previous relationship for a long time. Social media reactions reflected that tension immediately. Some fans expressed happiness for Jenny, saying she deserved peace after years of emotional strain. Others felt grief, not just for the relationship, but for the story they had emotionally invested in. A 10-year arc doesn't just belong to the people living it, it becomes shared with the audience watching it unfold. And when it ends quietly, without the expected closure, it can feel unfinished. What's especially telling is how quickly fans began reframing the wedding not as an ending, but as evidence. Evidence that Jenny may have reached a point where waiting was no longer an option, where stability mattered more than perseverance, where choosing herself felt necessary, not selfish. The symbolism of a second wedding also carries emotional weight in reality television. It suggests renewal, a conscious choice, a step taken with clarity rather than hope alone. And for fans who had watched Jenny compromise repeatedly, that clarity felt both shocking and relieving. This is where the conversation shifted from gossip to reflection. Instead of asking, "How could this happen?" and fans began asking, "What did this relationship ask of her?" And more importantly, what did it stop giving back? The wedding didn't erase the past. It reframed it. It forced viewers to reconsider whether the love story they admired was sustained by mutual growth or by one person's endurance. And once that question enters the conversation, it's impossible to ignore. In the next part, we're going to explore how Jenny herself may have changed over those 10 years, and why that personal evolution matters just as much as the relationship she left behind. Stay with me, because this next chapter isn't about romance at all. It's about identity. One of the biggest mistakes people make when they talk about long relationships is assuming that love stays the same while everything else changes. In reality, people change too, sometimes quietly, sometimes profoundly. And after 10 years under the spotlight, Jenny wasn't just part of a relationship story anymore. She was becoming someone new. Over the years, fans watched Jenny grow more self-aware. Early on, her decisions were framed around hope that circumstances would improve, that obstacles would soften, that patience would be rewarded. But as seasons passed, something shifted. Her conversations became less about waiting and more about needing clarity, needing stability, needing a life that didn't feel perpetually paused. That shift matters, because when a person evolves, their definition of love evolves too. What once felt romantic can begin to feel limiting. What once felt like sacrifice can begin to feel like self-erasure. And when that realization takes hold, it doesn't always come with anger. Sometimes it comes with calm. Fans who rewatch later episodes often notice how Jenny's tone changes. She asks more direct questions. She expresses fatigue more openly. She stops romanticizing struggle and starts naming it for what it is. These moments weren't dramatic enough to trend at the time, but they were honest. And honesty, when it accumulates, can lead to decisive action. The second wedding, in this context, starts to look less like a sudden leap and more like a continuation of growth. Not a rejection of her past, but a response to it. A choice shaped by everything she learned about herself, about compromise, and about what she can no longer accept. This is why so many fans are conflicted. On one hand, they're mourning a love story they believed in. On the other, they're recognizing a woman who finally chose certainty over endurance. And those two emotions can exist at the same time. What's important here is that growth doesn't always announce itself with drama. Sometimes it shows up as quiet confidence, as a willingness to stop explaining yourself, as the decision to move forward without waiting for permission. And that brings us to the final question fans keep asking, not about the wedding, but about the future. What does this mean for Jenny now? For the show? And for the audience that followed her for so long? That's where we're headed next. Stay with me, because the final part brings everything together: legacy, reaction, and what this moment really represents. As the dust settles around Jenny's second wedding, what's most striking isn't the speculation, it's the tone of the reaction. Fans aren't responding with outrage or betrayal. They're responding with reflection. Many longtime viewers are admitting that while the moment shocked them, it also made sense. And that realization is reshaping how Jenny's entire journey is being remembered. Online discussions are filled with comments that echo the same sentiment: she waited long enough. Fans are talking less about who she married and more about what she endured. They're revisiting old episodes with fresh eyes, recognizing moments where love required more patience from Jenny than it gave back. And instead of framing her new chapter as abandonment, many are framing it as survival. That shift matters, because it changes the legacy of her story. Jenny's decade-long relationship isn't being erased, it's being contextualized. It becomes a chapter of growth, not a failure. A chapter where love existed, but so did imbalance. Where commitment was real, but so was emotional exhaustion. And acknowledging both allows fans to hold empathy without needing a villain. In the world of 90 Day Fiancé, this moment also represents something bigger. It challenges the idea that perseverance alone defines success. It suggests that choosing peace can be just as meaningful as choosing to stay. And in a franchise built on extreme relationships, that message resonates deeply. For Jenny, this moment signals ownership. Ownership of her story, her time, and her future. The second wedding isn't just a ceremony, it's a statement that she no longer measures love by how much she can endure. She measures it by how much it supports who she has become. And for the audience, this becomes an invitation to reflect on their own definitions of commitment, patience, and growth. That's why this storyline lingers. It's not just about romance. It's about knowing when a chapter has given you everything it can, and having the courage to turn the page. Before we wrap up, I want to hear from you. Do you think Jenny made the right choice moving forward? Or do you believe her 10-year love story deserved a different ending? Drop your thoughts in the comments. These conversations matter more than headlines ever could. If you found this deep dive meaningful, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next breakdown. We cover the stories behind the scenes, the ones that don't always get the spotlight, but deserve to be understood. Because sometimes the most important moments in reality TV aren't the loudest ones. They're the ones that change everything quietly. Jenny's second wedding doesn't just reshape her personal story, it subtly challenges the way 90 Day Fiancé stories are usually told. For years, the franchise has thrived on extremes, impossible odds, dramatic sacrifices, and relationships that survive through sheer endurance. Jenny's journey fit that mold for a long time. But this moment signals something different, a pivot from endurance to intention. Fans are beginning to notice that 90 Day Fiancé itself feels like it's entering a more reflective phase. Long-term cast members aren't just chasing the next dramatic milestone anymore. They're confronting what life looks like after the big sacrifices have already been made. Jenny's story becomes part of that shift, a reminder that longevity doesn't always equal fulfillment, and that walking away from a familiar narrative can be an act of strength. This also changes how future storylines might be received. Viewers are responding positively to honesty over spectacle. They're engaging more with conversations about emotional balance, boundaries, and self-respect than with explosive confrontations alone. Jenny's decision opens the door for a different kind of storytelling, one where growth isn't measured by how long someone stays, but by how clearly they understand themselves. From a franchise perspective, this moment reinforces why Jenny's story resonated for so long. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. It was human. And now, her next chapter adds depth to that humanity rather than contradicting it. The audience that followed her for 10 years isn't disappearing, they're evolving alongside her. For many fans, this has sparked a broader conversation. Should reality TV continue to glorify struggle as proof of love, or should it make room for stories where choosing peace is the climax? Jenny's second wedding suggests the latter, and the response indicates viewers may be ready for it. And that brings us to the final reflection. Not about shock, not about gossip, but about meaning. When you step back and look at the full picture, Jenny's second wedding isn't the shocking twist people first thought it was. It's the outcome of a long, complicated journey, one shaped by patience, compromise, and years of emotional investment. A 10-year love story doesn't disappear, it leaves marks. It teaches lessons. And sometimes, it quietly prepares someone for a different future than the one they imagined at the start. This moment asks us to rethink what success looks like in relationships, especially in the world of reality TV. Is success measured by how long you stay, or by how honestly you live? Jenny's story suggests that growth doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes with clarity. With the courage to choose peace over persistence, and intention over endurance. For fans, that realization can be bittersweet. There's nostalgia for the love story that once symbolized hope. There's also relief in seeing someone finally step into certainty. Both emotions can exist at once, and that's what makes this chapter feel so real. It's not a fairy tale ending. It's a human one. And maybe that's why this storyline has resonated so deeply. Because beneath the headlines and reactions, it reflects something familiar. The moment you realize a chapter has given you everything it can, and it's time to turn the page. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Jenny's second wedding represents growth, closure, or something else entirely? Was this the ending you expected after 10 years, or does it change how you see her journey? Drop your thoughts in the comments. This conversation is far from over. If you enjoyed this deep dive and want more thoughtful breakdowns like this, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Your support helps us keep telling the stories behind the stories, the ones that deserve more than a headline. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the most powerful changes don't happen loudly. They happen when someone finally chooses themselves.